Ladies and gentlemen, the next speaker needs little introduction, as he's known to us all and is a great friend of NFU Cymru. On behalf of us all, I think it's only right that we congratulate Andrew on his recent promotion to the post of Director General for Economy, Skills and Natural Resources. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Andrew Slade.
Thank you, John. Prynhawn da. It's a great pleasure to be with you all, and it's also a particular pleasure not to be having to speak to you at 8 o'clock in the morning after a night out in Walkabout the previous evening. I stand before you today in my new role. I'm with colleagues today. We've got Tim Render, my successor, in the front row. If you haven't come across Tim, come and say hello to him. Afterwards, Tim brings a wealth of experience from DEFRA and indeed working overseas in Brussels and elsewhere, and from regional working in England. Christian Glossop, our chief vet, who I think is further up in the, yes, there we are, back in the middle there, and Gary Haggerty, who heads up our agriculture team. But what I wanted to talk to you today is less about the Director of Agricultural Policy work, which you've heard from the Cabinet Secretary, but more about this, which is the Prosperity for All Economic Action Plan. And there are two key things that are on my mind as I pick up this new role looking after economy, skills and natural resources for Welsh Government. And they are: one, Brexit, and two, delivering the government's national strategy. And for the first time in my time in Welsh Government, we have a strategy that binds the whole work of the Welsh Government together. It sits with four kind of key themes, including united and connected and a prosperous and secure Wales, healthy and active and an ambitious and learning Wales. And underneath that national strategy, there are going to be a series of action plans, and this is the first one out of the blocks. And this is a piece of work that has been done on a cross-government basis, as is also true of our Brexit work. Ministers have been very clear that we need to work in a way which is not, in the jargon, siloed, where we're just operating in different bits of Welsh Government, but that we work together across Welsh Government to deliver on joined-up outcomes. And as many of you have heard me say before, one of the real joys about working in the Welsh context is the ability to join things up, to be nimble, to take advantage of our scale and the fact that our policy to delivery chains, as we call them in the civil service, are short. In other words, you can come up with an idea, a policy idea, run it through to delivery pretty quickly, make the sorts of adjustments that you need to, trial things, as John has just described, pilot new ways of working, see if that works. If it doesn't, give it up, do something else. And if it does work and it's successful, then roll it out more widely. And it's a huge responsibility for us within the civil service, supporting ministers in a joined-up cabinet to go after this joined-up, integrated way of working, which is entirely in keeping with the obligations placed upon us under our Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which requires us to be integrated, collaborative, involve people in the way we work, take the long view, and try and head off problems before they begin. Now, why am I bringing this to you today? Because I think there's a huge opportunity for NFU Cymru to get involved in the process of following up on this action plan, because this is all about future-proofing our economy in Wales. Our Cabinet Secretary and the Economy Secretary, Ken Skates, have had a number of discussions, not least about the contribution that can be made in rural areas and the need to make sure that growth is evenly distributed, or at least more fairly distributed, if you want to put it that way, across the whole of Wales, and doesn't just concentrate on our agglomeration areas, our big urban areas, and along traditional transport corridors. So this plan, which was published just before Christmas, coming hard on the heels of the national strategy that was published in the autumn, is all about changing the way that Welsh Government does economic development work. Moving away from a fairly narrow view of sectors to something that's much more joined up. Moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to something that is far more relevant to the regions of Wales and the places of Wales and takes account of impacts on places, which looks hard at our infrastructure, our roads, our rail, not just in terms of getting the franchise arrangements right for Wales and Borders, or the metro in the south, or ideas for a metro in the north, but making sure that our wider infrastructure, our information and communications technology infrastructure, is more than fit for purpose for the future. If we're going to have electric vehicles in future increasingly appearing on our roads, beyond the number that are there already, we're going to need charging points, infrastructures and so on across the whole of Wales. We need to develop and work with others on battery technology. If we're going to have cars working on a semi or fully autonomous basis across the road network in Wales. And the latest projections on that, folks, are that we could be looking at by 2030 across the whole of the UK. Then we will need 5G coverage for Wales, which is fit for purpose, and that will need to supplement the broadband work that John was talking about earlier on. When we give money or provide investment or loan support for companies, we need to be much clearer that this is adding to the future strength and resilience of the nation as a whole, that there is something for something, that the public in putting money into investing in companies or the work of the private sector is getting something back in return, and as I say, that we are future-proofing our economy, that we have the skills that we need, that we harness the power of higher education, our science community, our R&D, and build that into the wider work of our economic development teams across the whole of Wales. And in particular, for you today, that we have a much greater focus on how we can develop the wider economy in our rural areas. And I urge you to get involved in this process. Lots of opportunity. In the early phase of this work, we're going to get going on what's called the calls to action. These are going to be calls for investment propositions for the future, for Welsh Government money. We're also going to be looking at the economic contract. That's the arrangements that we have with people who are in receipt of support. And then we're going to be looking at how we do regional working for the future. We have regional leads now appointed for economic development in the north. Gwenllian Roberts, some of you may know, she does quite a lot of work on energy stuff and in relation to Wilfa Newydd and where we're going on the new nuclear build there on Anglesey. Rodri Griffiths in mid and west and southwest Wales, and then David Rosser in the southeast, all of whom will have a strong interest in how the economy is performing in rural areas, and we will be building our approach, our thinking, and our support around that. So my pitch to you today, in respect of how we move forward for agriculture, is that this needs to be a whole government approach. We need to work with you in partnership on this, and we need to take a whole economy approach to this. This will complement what we're trying to do in respect of future agriculture policy and support for farmers and land managers, and it will become part of a wider dialogue, which I think you have a big opportunity to get involved with, and NFU Cymru has a strong contribution to make. Thank you.